world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Thursday, March 19th, as I am recording this. And as I say every day, we got a lot to talk about because there is always a lot to talk about. Now, yesterday, the podcast was like a 2-hour live that I did on TikTok the night before. You may have noticed that yesterday I did no actual TikToks. Well, the day got away from me. As you know, I work outside of doing content, and I was having issues. I had to run a bunch of errands. Next thing I know, it is like 9 o'clock. Um, I'm just sitting down to even get through the news, and I'm still fighting with a bunch of stuff. And before I knew it, well, here we were. Here we were. The day was gone. So uh, that is what it is. So instead of doing, a podcast like I normally would, which would be a recap of the stories I was going to, or I had covered for the day, and some stories I hadn't gotten to, I'm going to go ahead and just cover some of the stories. You may see additional things about the stories I'm going to talk about in TikToks for tomorrow, and some of these stories may be part of the TikToks or the short videos that I'm going to do for tomorrow. So, just heads up as to what's going on there. Now, I'm trying to get better and be back on track. I know I have to catch Spotify back up. It is one of the things that I struggle with as far as getting content posted. Um, so working on that. And I thank all of you who do catch my content wherever you find it for engaging with me and enjoying everything that I do and giving me the time to go through it. Now, one of the first stories I wanted to talk about was something uh, that happened. Actually, I did as a TikTok for yesterday. And that is Joe Kent, the head of counterterrorism for the Trump administration, has resigned. He sent out a resignation letter um, looking for uh, saying basically that there was evidence in uh, no evidence for the Iran war. Basically, no evidence they were going to strike us. Pretty much undermines the entire narrative that this administration tried to use as far as any of it goes. Okay, they want us to believe that they were just out to protect U.S. interests and they were going ahead and trying to um, they were going. Sorry, I'm trying to look up uh, a story here while I'm doing this. He basically said there was no evidence to any of it, right? Nothing that proved why we did it, other than it was Donald Trump's idea. Um, and now, after he basically said there was no reason for it and there was no reason for us to continue with it or anything, um, now the FBI has said, let's see, FBI is investigating former National Counterterrorism Center Director Joe Kent over allegations that he leaked classified information to the matter. And that was coming from Fox. They're claiming that it predates his leaving the administration. In a public statement, Kent said he cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war, arguing Iran posed no imminent threat and that the conflict marked a break from the administration's prior approach to avoiding prolonged wars in the Middle East. A senior administration official previously told Fox News Digital that Kent was a known leaker who had been cut out of intelligence briefings months before his resignation. Kent is a former Army Green Beret, CIA paramilitary officer. He was appointed to lead counterterrorism in early 2025. He is a Gold Star spouse. And they don't really say what intelligence he is accused of leaking. But now they're claiming that they are looking into him for leaking classified information, which is interesting because mishandling of classified information was something that Donald Trump was accused of when it came to his possession of and handling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, especially after he was out of office. But could this just be an investigation into Joe Kent because he said there was no imminent threat? It very well could be, and that they are just saying that the investigation predates all of that because they are trying to smear the name of Joe Kent because he is saying bad things about Donald Trump. That is typical Donald Trump ploy right there. Now, yesterday or a couple days ago, let's see. Venezuela won the World Baseball Classic. That would have been, I believe, they won the World Baseball Classic Tuesday night. And President Donald Trump has responded to Venezuela beating the United States in the World Baseball Classic by calling for it to become a U.S. state. After Venezuela defeated the U.S. in Miami on Tuesday night, like I said, to win its first WBC title, Trump took to Truth Social statehood President DJT. Now, this comes just one day after Trump also floated the idea of Venezuela becoming America's 51st state after it won the semifinal against Italy. Statehood number 51, anyone, Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social on Monday. Now, that all came from MSN. And yes, Donald Trump on Monday took to Truth Social and he said, Venezuela statehood number 51, question mark. If he is that concerned about adding a 51st state, we got 4 good options. And part of this I brought up in, I think it was Tiffany's live over on TikTok after I ended mine last night. And I'm probably crazy for thinking about this, but anyway, first of all, Donald Trump has no intention of making Venezuela a 51st state unless they come begging, because he wants to be the president who adds territory to the United States. You know, he would go down in the history books as the president who added the 51st state to the flag, right? And he thinks it would give him a level of prestige, a level of notoriety, a level of favorability in the history books. But if he really wants to add a number 51 to the flag, how about he adds Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands? How about the Northern Mariana Islands or Guam? How about all 4 of them? But I said 5. Well, the 5th one has been one a lot of people have been clamoring for, and that is Washington, D.C. And a couple of the reasons why he would not want to put any of those states, but specifically Puerto Rico or D.C., in as states. they would lean Democratic. And it would distort the balance of power. In fact, if they were to add four Democrats to the Senate right now, that would make it 51 to 53. Republicans would still maintain control, but they would only need to flip 3 seats then in the November midterms in order to have control of Congress. So he doesn't want to do that. And I don't know about DC. DC would have, I think, two representatives in the House, I think, and I believe Puerto Rico would have 7, and they would all be majority Democratic leaning. So that would mean they would lose the majority in the House of Representatives. Now, there is math involved. Certain states would have to redraw, and it's not, it becomes weird. Certain states do lose representation unless Congress passes something changing the number from 435 to something different, because right now they have been capped at 435 for a very long time. And every time population changes and shifts and moves, some states gain representation, some states lose. I remember when I was in uh, grade school, middle school, and maybe even into high school. It was either after the 1990 census or the 2000 census, one of the two. Iowa went from having 5 congressional districts and 2 senators to 4 congressional districts and 2 senators because of population. And that's exactly what would happen in a way if they add states to the map, right? It's not a guarantee. Now, Montana recently just gained a second member of the House of Representatives. They may lose that second member, again, unless Congress were to pass something. That's only, of course, if Donald Trump were to try to actually add another state. But I said something about DC, and the idea I floated over on Tiffany's Live was different than statehood. And it would be a slightly more complicated process. Statehood, let me look it up for sure. Uh, but it requires uh, let's see. I want to be accurate here. The U.S. Constitution grants Congress the authority to admit new states under Article 4, Section 3, which states that new states may not be formed within existing states or by combining states without the consent of affected state legislatures and Congress. Additionally, Article 4, Section 4 requires that all states maintain a republican form of government, meaning a governance by elected representatives under the rule of law. And I'll get into that in a minute. Population and government requirements. While the Constitution does not specify a precise population threshold, Congress historically expects a territory to have a sufficient population to sustain a functional state government and contribute to the national economy. Northwest Ordinance of 1787 set a precedence by suggesting a population of 60,000 free adult males as a guideline, though this is not legally binding. Territories must also demonstrate the capacity for self-governance and political stability. Procedural steps. Residents of the territory formally express their desire for statehood, often through a referendum. That's why usually every 2 to 4 years, there is a measure on the ballot in Puerto Rico trying to get over that 50% threshold to say, yes, we want to become a state. Congress may pass an enabling act to authorize the territory to draft a state constitution and establish a government. This act may outline specific conditions for admission. So Congress has to tell the territory, okay, we know you want to become a state, basically set up a state government. Now, for like places like Puerto Rico and Guam and all of our current territories, they already have a functional government as the territory. They would just need to draft a constitution, and they may even have something similar in their territory charter. The territory drafts a constitution that aligns with the U.S. Constitution, ensuring protections of civil rights and democratic governance. The proposed constitution is then ratified by the territory's residents. So it would have to get passed again, probably by a referendum and a vote. And then Congress must review the Constitution, and if it accepts it, pass an admission act. And then the president would have to sign it. Now, what benefits would having a state do? Statehood grants full political representation in Congress, including voting members in the House and Senate, places the new state on equal footing with existing states. It also allows the state to exercise dual sovereignty, sharing power with the federal government while maintaining authority over international affairs. So basically, or over internal affairs. I read that wrong. So basically, it would be less federal government oversight in the territories, which again would be Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Northern Mariana Islands. And it would give them equal representation. Now, currently in Congress, all of the territories and Washington, D.C. do have representation. I believe they have one member in the House of Representatives each and one member in the Senate each, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on the Senate, but what they are non-voting members. So while they can be there, they are represented. They can have a voice. They are not allowed to vote. They are not allowed to introduce legislation. The only things they could do would be to partner with somebody else from another state to introduce whatever they need to introduce. And if Donald Trump really wanted to be a go-getter, he could say, "Hey, let's try to pass something to admit all four territories to the union. I want to be known as the guy who admits states. Let's introduce 4." He could do it. That would add 8 senators in the Senate, and it would add a number of representatives. Now, what I don't 100% know is if it would change the number of members of the House of Representatives, or if that would stay at 435, and if it would just get shrunk as needed. Like if it would just stay 435, but they would end up, moving them around until all the states had some representation. But that would also change the number for getting elected, the Electoral College. If it is going to be if the 435 stays, they would end up having just over half. I'm sorry, I'm doing some math here. Yeah, okay. So it would change the math for the Electoral College is where I was going with that. So you have 108 and 435, 543. It would change the math needed to 272 instead of 270, just to add. And then if they change the number of representatives, that would change too. I don't expect it to happen during a midterm election year. We're too close to the midterms now to start redistricting and changing, unless they did something where they wanted to add extra members, and those wouldn't count toward any of the other representation. But if he wanted to do that, he could, and he could push for it. And if they got all four territories as states, he would probably be noted in history for doing something positive. Now, I'm going to go back to DC. Mentioned DC, and a lot of people want DC to be a state. And what I was talking about on Tiffany's Live in the early morning hours yesterday morning was that I had a different idea. And this would be a little harder to do. This would take a constitutional amendment rather than just passing something through Congress to allow for statehood. And that it would still grant DC special status. Because one of the reasons DC is the way it is, it was set up, it was taken from bits of Maryland and Virginia. It was meant to be the capital. It was meant to not be part of any given state. They wanted it separate. And my idea would keep it separate and maintain that area of it being special by saying, okay, DC and only DC is recognized as a special district when it comes to Congress, and that with this recognition, they are granted equal representation, voting representation in the House of Representatives, like a state, and they are awarded 2 senators like a state. And if the number of senators per state ever changes, that DC would be affected the same way. Now, in the US Constitution, it does say that anything can be an amendment except for changing the equal proportion of representatives per state in the Senate. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means you couldn't make the Senate like the House. And a lot of people have been talking about that for years. Well, it's not fair that Wyoming has like 750,000 people in it, I think. Again, I want to be right. But Wyoming has 588,000. And Washington, D.C. has almost 700,000. But anyway, my point is there are 2 senators per state. People use Wyoming a lot of times because it's so small, that it should have fewer senators like you do state population, like how California has way more members of the House of Representatives than any other state because their population is so huge, and that they could do the same thing. Except my thought was you still give them the same representation with DC, but without making the change. But where I was going with it is, I kind of sidetracked myself there for a second. When it comes to equal representation, they couldn't make an amendment that says you get 1 senator per 100,000 of your population or something like that. But they could say, well, every state now gets 3 senators. Now, that would still be equal? You could do that. You could say every state gets 3 senators. That's still equal, but you couldn't say every state gets senators based on their population. Anyway, if Donald Trump really wanted to be so focused on, adding states, he's throwing out the idea of Venezuela being number 51, but he's talked about California being number 51 before, or not California, Jesus Christ. It's been a day. Canada being number 51. And if it would never happen, okay? Canada's never going to become a US state. But what would happen is if Canada did want to become a state, more than likely it would become multiple states. Probably all the provinces as they currently are would just become separate states. But again, that's never going to happen. Donald Trump just wants the prestige of adding states to the union because it's something that positive that he could be remembered for. And what they could do is just take the territories that we already have, give them statehood that's overdue. I mean, we've had Puerto Rico for over 100 years at this point. They are beyond due for statehood. Now, uh, there is a story here that I want to talk about. And this is something I am not pushing for. I am not supporting. I want to make that clear, but it's out there. And this comes from Fox News. An Iranian movement called the Blood Covenant is claiming to have crowdfunded more than $40 million as a reward for eliminating President Donald Trump, according to Middle East Research Institute. A website for the movement contained a poster of Trump in crosshairs with an appeal to donate in order to help establish peace. It added the poster quotes a verse from the Quran that reads, "Strive with your wealth and your lives in the cause of Allah." This is a call to jihad, inviting believers to donate their money and sacrifice their lives. The Middle East Research Institute said the poster lends religious legitimacy to eliminating Trump. The apparent threat comes weeks after the U.S. launched devastating airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. A U.S. Secret Service official told Fox News, "We operate in a heightened and very dynamic threat environment, and the safety and security of the president and all of our protectees remains our highest priority." If there is a bounty out, that's bad news for Donald Trump. If he wasn't already paranoid, I mean, it's going to get worse, right? He's already paranoid. We heard. I think I was talking to Mike, the Rational Boomer, and he was talking about Donald Trump and that this story had come out saying that when Trump orders McDonald's, he never orders it himself. He sends varying aides, and he picks a different aide every day. And this was going back to his first term. He picks a different aide and he picks a different McDonald's every single day. And he sends them out to go get his food because he's terrified of somebody doing something to take him. Sorry about that. He's terrified of somebody doing something to take him out. And that's only going to add to his paranoia, especially if he's aware of it. But we don't know what he's aware of because, well, he is very much suffering from the effects of dementia. Now, JD Vance has labeled the surge in gas prices as a temporary blow, but has said that people are hurting, but it's only going to be temporary. Vance said gas prices are up, and we know they're up. We know that people are hurting because of it, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that they stay lower. He said they will eventually decline. How much time in an eventually, JD? Vance said the president said this, and I certainly agree with it. This is a temporary blow. What happened under the Biden administration is that gas prices were high for 4 years. Gas prices are higher right now, and frankly, they're not even as high as they were during the Biden administration. Here's the thing. Joe Biden inherited the recipe for high gas prices. He didn't cause the high gas prices. Donald Trump, as a reaction to COVID, and because he was worried about oil and gas prices plummeting, He went to OPEC, the oil producing countries, and said, hey, cut your production for a while, and let's stabilize this. And they agreed. They cut like 2 million barrels a day in production. And because it was reduced, gas prices stabilized. And then once people started getting the COVID vaccine, people started being able to travel, go back to work, do all of those things. The demand for gas increased. And guess what? Prices went through the roof. At one point here, I was paying over $5 a gallon. Um, and but by the time Biden left office around here, gas was 268. It was back to roughly normal. Joe Biden had gotten it down, but people like JD have been lying to the MAGAs, the Republican supporters of Donald Trump, and saying that gas prices were high the entirety of his term. That wasn't true. Joe Biden fought like hell to get them lowered. And then once OPEC started producing again, after the 2-year contract that Donald Trump had signed that he negotiated was up, it stabilized back out and it went lower. Now, I just went and got gas myself here, actually, I didn't go get gas. I went past the gas station. And uh, it was 3.49 for regular. The next one up was over $4, and diesel was almost 5. And it was never that much of a price difference, realistically, between the cheapest option that gas station would have and the next one up. It was usually 20 cents, maybe 30. It was something, but now it was like 4.29 or something like that. It was like 70 cents more. Considerable. Um, and they want you to believe that it is still somehow, they want to keep everybody talking about Joe Biden. Well, they were higher under Biden. Well, maybe they were higher, but we're not at the end yet. The Strait of Hormuz isn't open, and Donald Trump has tried repeatedly to get our allies to come in and bail him out, and they're saying no dice, we're not doing that. Um, we're not going to bail you out. We're not going to help you out. We're not going to open the strait. And if you want it open, you do it. Now, Donald Trump was talking Monday, I think it was, and he was talking about opening the strait. And he said we were going to work with getting people to go in and help us open the Strait of Hormuz. And he said, well, then you're going to have Pepe come along with his $1 billion sugar boat. And, you know, uh, we got to make sure it's open for him or something like that. But he was talking about Pepe and $1 billion sugar boats. And there was some confusion as to what he was talking about. Well, he could have been talking about a couple different things. Sugar boats were something that happened back in early colonial America and prior to the Civil War, prior to the outlaw of the slave trade, where they would basically, as one part of the triangle trade, they would move sugar in part of helping to make molasses, to make rum, um, and to move that they would end up selling to go get, uh, slaves. They would go trade them for people to come back and work the plantations. He could have been talking about that, but he also has a friend, an 81-year-old donor. Um, he goes by Pepe. I can't think of his last name right now. And he has a fortune in sugar transport. But why would this guy send sugar boats through a mined strait where there are literal mines at the bottom of the strait that would blow up any boat that goes through? Those are not military boats. That just shows you how broken Donald Trump's mind is. He's not in the right frame of mind when he's doing any of this at this point. He is uh, suffering from dementia, maybe from a bout of Alzheimer's, um, something like that. Maybe a bit of both. And, oil and gas prices aren't going to come down, even if the Strait of Hormuz is open. It is not going to come down immediately. Now, something that came across um, as I was on a live with Will earlier. Iran, this comes from MSN as well, actually through CNBC. Iran missile attack on Qatar causes extensive damage to facility housing huge gas plant. Qatar said Wednesday that Iranian missiles caused extensive damage to Ras Laffan Industrial City, home to the largest liquefied natural gas export facility in the world. Qatar's foreign ministry denounced the attack as a dangerous escalation, flagrant violation of state sovereignty, and a direct threat to its national security and regional stability. Qatar reserves the right to respond in accordance with the right of self-defense guaranteed under international law, the foreign ministry said in a statement. Brent crude oil price, the international benchmark, surged more than 7% to $111.23. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was up to just over $100. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has threatened to attack energy facilities in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates after Israel bombed a natural gas processing facility in Iran. Emergency teams were deployed to contain the fires. No casualties have been reported. Qatar's Interior Ministry later said the fire at the facility had initially been brought under control. Qatar halted LNG production March 2nd, due to Iranian drone strikes. The Gulf state is the second largest liquid natural gas exporter in the world after the United States. It accounts for 20% of the global natural gas exports. Escalating attacks on Middle East oil and gas infrastructure threaten to intensify massive energy supply disruption triggered by the Iran war. Oil tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has plunged due to Iranian attacks on commercial ships. The strait is the most important trade choke point for oil, with about 20% flowing through there. And it just goes on to talk about how oil could go up. Now, that's bad news for the administration. That's going to cause oil and natural gas prices to go up even more. And this administration didn't have a plan when they went in. What they expected to happen was that they'd go in, what they did on February 28th, they'd throw a few missiles, they'd go in, and Venezuela would wave the white flag. We surrender. Done. Or not Venezuela. I meant like they did in Venezuela. I'm having a bad day, if you can't tell, when it comes to keeping my country straight, apparently. But they thought Iran would go in like Venezuela did and basically go, we give up and it's over. They went in on January 3rd into Venezuela. They captured Maduro in a matter of hours, right? One strike, quick, fast, and in a hurry, and it was done. They thought that Iran would do the same thing. Iran's been ready. Now they are sending apparently more U.S. troops to the area. There is talk that they may be building up for a ground offensive, and that they may end up trying to take both sides of the Strait of Hormuz by force, and being able to forcibly hold it open, basically, and stop that choke point. But even if they do that, it's not going to magically solve the world's oil and natural gas problem overnight. It's not, okay? It's going to end up, even if they fix everything, it's going to take months before this comes down. They may not get oil and gas prices down before the midterms. And speaking of the midterms, I am still convinced that the Democrats are going to take the House, possibly the Senate. And the longer this conflict goes on, the longer oil and natural gas prices continue to rise, and as the economy becomes even worse because of it, the more and more likely that the Democrats win the midterms becomes, and the less likely Republicans continue to stand by Donald Trump. Now, the White House has apparently offered some concessions to end the partial government shutdown, the third government shutdown of this administration just in the last year. Department of Homeland Security is still shut down. Now, this comes from the USA Today. Seeking to end the rapidly worsening shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, White House has offered to expand the use of body-worn cameras for federal immigration enforcement agents and limit their activities at churches, schools, and hospitals. Let's talk about those two before I get deeper into it. First of all, churches, schools, and hospitals. Prior to this administration, those places were deemed off limits to immigration enforcement. They were basically considered sanctuaries. You weren't allowed to go into a church to conduct any of it. You weren't good. If you were in a hospital, you were probably there because you were sick, right? Because you needed medical treatment of some kind for something. And it was just basically considered off limits. Same thing with schools and daycares, because you weren't allowed under previous guidance. Now, those were all things set up just as internal policy, and that could be changed by the president, and they were by Donald Trump. That schools and daycares also were not allowed because you were not going to go in, capture the kids first, and use them as bait for the parents. That was supposed to be a no-go, but Donald Trump doesn't care. This administration doesn't care. We know that the cruelty is the point. Now, on the use of body cameras, they said that they are offering increased use of body cameras, which is still shy of what the Democrats want, which is all agents to always have a body camera on and for it to always be recording. But they don't want cameras on. They don't want records of what's going on because it shows them violating due process. And yes, for the Republicans out there, immigrants get due process. Part of due process is your ability to stand before a judge and prove your immigration status. Whether you are here legally, whether you're here illegally, whether you have applied for asylum, whether you have a green card, and you've done the steps legally, but you guys don't care about that. You don't want them to show their immigration paperwork. You just want them to be able to go, yeah, get them fuckers out of here. But now I'm going to continue. But a month into the crisis, Trump administration is still holding firm on one of the more contentious parts of the debate to reform the 9/11 era cabinet agency, opposing any kind of masks on law enforcement officers. So they want to be able to go in, continue to wear the masks, be anonymous, and not be identified. Now, concessions were detailed in a March 17 letter to Senate Republican leaders from top Trump administration officials. They are trying to get it. They also said in there that they would agree to stop deporting American citizens. Okay, except for one problem there. American citizens are not subject to immigration enforcement. They're not supposed to be. Okay, they are American citizens. Again, that's where the due process part that MAGA doesn't like comes into play. They are supposed to have due process so they can show to a judge that, yes, they are American citizens, first and foremost, and that they are entitled to the benefits of that citizenship. But right now, immigration enforcement, ICE, They come in, they go, yeah, I don't. That's a fake driver's license. I don't believe it, and ignore it. And they want to be able to deport these people. They should never have been given that authority anyway. Um, the whole thing is because they are out of control. And they're doing pretty much whatever they want. And let's see. I was looking up another story I wanted to talk about. And that was on Pam Bondi. I'll get to that in just a second. But I mean, the immigration here is the problem, right? Like the immigration enforcement, they're doing uh, a they're basically just going in, rounding up whoever they want. Oh, you look like you're here illegally, so you got to go, and that's got to stop, right? She, we thought it would stop under when Kristi Noem got fired, but it didn't, and now you have Markwayne Mullin, who is up for the position. And I'm hearing differing things about Markwayne Mullin, the senator from Oklahoma. Uh, I've heard some people say that he doesn't need to resign, and other people are saying that he does need to resign um, in order to be up for congressional approval. So, from what I understand, he has not resigned yet, but apparently he is uh, up, or at least he's being actively considered. Now, he's not very bright. He's a former MMA fighter. And by that, he fought 3 fights, 2 against the same person, um, and was not really, it never really caught on that he became a big fighter, but he thinks he's a tough guy. And why would he go? Well, he's up for reelection this year. And it is entirely conceivable that he was worried that even in his safe district, where he won by like 28 or 30% of the vote, that he could end up flipping that race, or that he could end up losing that race, right? And if he was worried about having to run in a contentious reelection bid, maybe he decides to end up, uh, you know, taking this position. Maybe that's why he said, yeah, I'll go ahead and put me up. I'll go through the confirmation process, because then he doesn't have to run for reelection. It's somebody else's problem. So there's that. Last thing I want to talk about here is in an effort to get around a congressional subpoena, Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi is the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, had a closed door meeting yesterday, Wednesday, with lawmakers on the House Oversight Committee over files linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Let's see. I'm trying to see who said this. Representative Garcia, the ranking member of the Oversight Committee, asked Pam Bondi, do you commit to coming in for your sworn deposition and testimony under oath per the subpoena that was bipartisan and that Oversight Chairman James Comer put out just 2 days ago? He added, the Attorney General would not commit to following the subpoena and coming in under oath, yet she wants to come in and set up some kind of fake hearing where we ask questions and it's not transcribed, it's not under oath, and not shown to the American people. Basically, she wants to come in, answer questions, lie her ass off, have no record of it, so she can't be held accountable for it later. And it's not under oath, so she can't be held for perjury because she knows she's going to lie. Tuesday, the House Oversight Committee formally subpoenaed Bondi to answer questions about the files. Representative Nancy Mace had said it's not clear if the Justice Department had handed over all records related to Epstein as required under the law. Not clear. Jesus Christ. They've said they've only released about half and that the rest isn't coming out, and they claim because of ongoing investigations. But Jesus Christ, how much more do you need from them? They said they haven't released everything. That's like, getting caught doing 90 miles an hour down the highway and saying, where they have you on record and they have, body cam footage of the speed clock showing you doing 90, and you go, can you prove I was speeding? It's dumb. I'm just looking here to see if there's anything else in this thing. So I'm not seeing any more relevant information in that article, but effectively, they've subpoenaed her. She's supposed to show up. She's supposed to testify. All right, great. She shows up, says, hey, I want to do this closed door, off the book thing. Never show it to the American people. I'm going to give you a briefing instead. And they're like, nope, not good enough. So that she is going to be deposed, apparently, or is scheduled to be in mid-April. We'll see if she actually shows up. And from there, well, everything else has to, we'll see what comes out of it. But I think the Epstein files is the one thing that this administration can't get away from. Despite how bad everything else is going, they can't get away from the files, right? Their own party, she was subpoenaed bipartisan. 5 Republicans agreed to issue a subpoena to the sitting attorney general to show up for an under oath appearance where she is answering questions. And that is, I'm not saying it's unusual, but that is something you wouldn't have thought we'd be talking about a year into this administration where the Republicans are pretty much rallying the troops, right? They know they can't get away from this. So they're trying to do the best to make it look like at least that they are complying, that they are trying to get the information out to the American people. They're trying to make it look that way. It's not working entirely. They're still doing what they can to cover it up. But Donald Trump is still at the top. He wants things hidden. And some Republicans are trying to cover for him, like Pam Bondi. Thing is, when it's all gone, when it's all said and done, and he is gone, when Donald Trump is out of power, when JD, because I think JD Vance is going to end up taking over before the end of Donald Trump's scheduled term. And I don't think there's any way the Republicans, unless they completely flip the script in the next 2 years and fix everything, which I don't think they have the tools to do that, unless things get drastically better, I don't see any way that they win 28. But when Donald Trump is gone, JD Vance is gone, there are going to be people held accountable for all of the things and all of the misdeeds. And they're just hoping that Donald Trump will save them in the end. And I don't think he's going to do that. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. The only thing that I'm worried about possibly happening is if something happens and they try to use the auto pen before the public knows that something happened to Donald Trump, and they try to salvage it that way. And that would be pretty fitting given the fact that the Republicans like to bitch about Joe Biden and his administration's use of the auto pen. But all administrations use it, just not in the criminal way the Republicans have accused the Biden administration of doing, even though they have no proof. And in the way I'm worried that because they accused the Democrats of doing it, that Republicans may be considering, if something were to happen to Donald Trump, that they may be considering how they would handle it in that case. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.